Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to Legal Notes with attorneys Ned Barron and Mary Ann Charron. Good morning.
Morning, Gary.
Good morning.
We got into some heavy topics last week. I'll actually come to think of it, the last couple of weeks.
I know.
We talked about a parent living with the child so the parent could stay, in home.
Right.
But what options are there if a parent is already, let's say, in a skilled nursing facility?
Yeah, I think so last week, one of the things that I had mentioned was that, the state has these programs so that people don't have to be in skilled nursing, right? Because skilled nursing is super expensive. And I think I threw out that $14,000 to $18,000 a month.
Yeah,
figure.
I remember when you said that. You had me at that. You misspoke and were saying 14 to 1,800, but
No.
14 to 18,000 per month?
Yeah.
Who's got that?
Right. And so if you do have it, you spend it pretty quickly. And so the state, like I said, Ned has talked about Title 19 and Medicaid. So when people run out of money and can no longer be in their home, then it used to be that the option only was a nursing home. That's where people were, I don't want to say warehoused, because that's not fair to some of the places that do provide very
Sure.
good care. So over the years, there has been research, right? Auditors, analytics, all the rest of that. And the state has realized that if we can support people so that they don't have to go into a skilled nursing home until much later in their lives, if necessary, then we can save money. We can all save money. So last week we talked about the Home Care for Elders program. And this week what Ned and I wanted to talk about was another one that probably people do not know about, and it's called Money Follows the Person. And because all of us have seen the circumstance where the parent who is in a nursing home says, "Get me out of here. I don't want to be here. I want to go home." And is it possible? And some people don't know that that is a possibility. And so that's why we wanted to focus on the MFP, as we call it. But it's a program that is really wonderful, and it's called Money Follows the Person.
Yeah, and I'd like to illustrate that with a case that I was involved with. Mm-hmm. I had been asked quite a few years ago by a probate court to be the conservator of an elderly gentleman. He was in his early 80s, and he had no family. So, or at least no family that was close by or close to him. And he had been in a nursing home for 6 years. And he had been wanting to get out. And I became his conservator. And one of the things as a conservator that your responsibility is to try and do what the conserved person wants. And his goal was to get out of the nursing home. And so I contacted the state, and we worked with them to put in an application for this Money Follows the Person program. And he was accepted into the program. Oh, I should back up just to say that he was already on Title 19. So he had already run out of funds. So he had no money except Social Security and a pension.
No money's following this person then.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about that phrase or the title "Money Follows the Person" is what they're saying is that the money that was being used by the state to pay for the care in the nursing home can follow the person out into the community. Right. So what we were able to do for him, and he also was confined. Was confined to a wheelchair.
Right.
So he had medical needs.
Story just gets more and more sad here.
Well,
or better.
It does.
Well,
right.
There's a silver lining.
Okay. We haven't gotten there yet.
Right. But the really great news was that he was approved for the program, and they assessed him physically, they assessed his needs, and then went out and they found an apartment that was appropriate for him. And not only that, they also found a live-in caregiver.
Right.
So this gentleman who was in a nursing home and very unhappy was able to move out into his own apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, with a live-in aide, and he was living there successfully and, most importantly, happily for 3 years. And during that 3-year period of time, his needs increased. Yeah. That he was able to, at the beginning, because he was confined to a wheelchair, he had a hospital bed that was paid for by the state. He had what we call a sit-to-stand lift, which is a device that the caregiver can use that he has to help assist with, but they can lift him up, so they can do transfers to toilet or to the shower chair and all that. But his ability to help with that process declined, and so the state brought in a Hoyer lift, which they were able to use to still keep him in there. Yeah. And then finally, unfortunately, I guess the downside is that his health declined, and he couldn't even help with that. But and so he is back in a nursing home now. But the kind of the story or the bright spot in that story is that he had 3 years,
quality years,
right,
where he wanted to be. Where
he wanted to be, he was getting food cooked the way he wanted it to be cooked. It was he was extremely happy being that, and I was really I was really happy to be able to help him to make that transition.
I was in a regular apartment complex, and I had been there once with Ned, and do you remember the neighbor who came by? I mean, he made friends. And there was a neighbor, they had children. I mean, so he really was part of that community, and it was such a nice thing to see. And it did mean an awful lot to him to be able to be out. The needs that Ned was describing, as you could hear, were immense. A 24/7 live-in caregiver, apparatus to be able to make sure that the individual medical needs were met, physical needs were met. I mean, Hoyer lifts are expensive, hospital bed. They provided some basic furniture in the apartment. So it's an amazing program. I have someone who I recently got out of a nursing home on the same program, MFP. His needs are different. He doesn't need a 24/7 caregiver. He had a tragic accident, was at the hospital for special care, went to a nursing home for rehab, and finally at a point where we could discharge him back into the community. And so he has, with the funds that the state was providing him under the MFP program, he has intense PT, OT, all right? He has a nurse.
Explain what those are.
Physical therapy.
And occupational therapy.
Thank you.
Good catch.
And he has Meals on Wheels. He's learning how to cook again, but in the meantime, we have Meals on Wheels that is coming to make sure that he has nutritious and appropriate meals for him. He has a nurse who comes in. So what happens under this program is that the state has a budget. And they have a number in mind, because at some point the state says, if it costs too much to support you in the community, then you're going to stay in the nursing home. But if it costs us less than that number, then we're more than happy to help you stay in the community, right? So they come up with a budget, and if your needs equal, can meet that budget, and there's some other requirements, and Ned and I can talk about what those requirements are for that program. Then you get busted out of the nursing home. Then you get to go into the community.
So when you have a 24/7 live-in caregiver, these people don't have families. They must reside with that person 24/7 and look after them. What about that person's life? What about their family?
Well, first of all, it's you have to have a certain personality to be good at that.
Certain personality, that's right. The least of it.
Well, I'm just saying, first off the bat, right? The second thing is that it is a 24-hour. You are there for 24 hours, but you're not working the whole time. Right. It's not that they need constant care. It's not.
Is it one person, or is it 5 days? 4 days on and then 3 days off, and then maybe piggybacking or leapfrogging with another coworker. I mean, we all have families of our own and lives, and and I understand your job, and I understand dedication and crazy work hours, but I guess what I'm not understanding is how
So in the agency,
How do you get up? And I'm sorry, I didn't even cut you off. How do you get up in the morning and really looking forward to the work that you're doing when there's no off time? You're on all the time.
yeah, that's part of the job. I mean, if you hire to be 24/7, the agency hires you to be there 24/7. So that's what you sign up for.
There's no burnout, though. I mean,
Of course, there can be burnout.
Because we're all human beings.
But
Well, they also take
vacations.
weeks. They'll take a week off. Every few months to go home to their family if they have a family,
How do you date? How do you even have to go home to whom? I'd be divorced. I'd be like,
But maybe you wouldn't be the good caregiver.
Well, no, but there's just natural things in life
Note
where.
to self, don't hire Gary.
Yeah, well, don't. I know my lane here, folks. But anybody has basic needs and ways in which way as human beings function, and the social aspect of human life.
Yep.
It's what separates us from animals, and.
So there are some people whose that is who they are, right? There's something for everyone, and if you can find a really good person who is...
Wait, there's an abundance of them? Wow. Oh my goodness.
There are enough to support these programs, right? I mean,
absolutely incredible then.
Yeah.
God bless them.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is a tough job. Being a caregiver is one of the hardest jobs, I've ever seen.
I hope they're paid handsomely.
Whether you're paid or if you're a family member, as we talked about last week, right? It's just it's a tough job, but there are people who are built for it mentally and all that.
Right.
But it is a tough job. But it is what, as Marianne said, it's what they sign up for. So they know it going into it that this is. I mean, again, as I said before, they're not constantly working 24 hours. So we're watching TV or they're on their computer when,
it's almost like
when they're not
a family member with them. I mean, Ned and I have had some of our conserved people who have had 24/7 caregivers pass away, and they're the first ones to speak up at the memorial service. They're the ones who are weeping and crying because they got to be a child, cousin, however you define that relationship. And that's when, if you can have that kind of connection with that person, then it works, and it works really, really well.
And how do you not have a connection?
Well, some...
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, look, there are the other sides too, right? Yeah. As you already said, Gary, it sounds like for some people, you couldn't do it, right? That you have a life. In this case, well, I'll put it this way: with the gentleman that I was telling you about, that I got out of the nursing home, was in the community for 3 years. He went through more than a couple caregivers because it is part of that. I mean, he was also, I'm not gonna say a really difficult guy, but he could be crabby. You think of, anyway, the one really bad caregiver who actually in the beginning while he was there seemed like a pretty good caregiver. However, I get a phone call late one night from the agency saying, I just need you to know that the caregiver was in a car accident coming back from a party in New York, and the bottom line was that he left the person who was confined to a wheelchair in the apartment by himself while he went to a party and drank and got in a car accident on the way.
Needless to say, he was fired.
That's the least of his problems.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so you do have some bad ones, right? And then you have the ones who are really good, and we
like you said, the ones that speak up at the funeral and are weeping
and they're there, and they have become just part of the family, and it's a really great thing. And so, does it mean that it's perfect? Immediately, no. But nothing is perfect. We always have to be on the lookout. And like Ned said, he was the conservator, which means that Ned and I, when we're in those roles, we have to make sure that there is the relationship, that there is a dynamic, and it's a good dynamic, that it's working, that the person's doing their job like they're supposed to be doing.
I want to go back, if you don't mind, to the money follows the person program. I would, number one, how much are they getting that would take you from, let's say you were in an institutionalized setting, a nursing home or whatnot, group home.
Yeah.
And then they decided to use a scenario that you've mentioned at the top of the show. Then the person wanted to transition out to their home. Remember you said the person lived for 3 more years and they had a quality of life. Yeah. What set amount of money are they taking with them from that institutional setting to a more home environment that can cover? Like, I would imagine if wheelchairs are a part of this equation, then there's going to be a widening of doors to make sure that the wheelchair can get in and out of bathrooms, let's say. If the person has a pacemaker, maybe they can't use a microwave, so, they've got to make sure. I mean, there's a whole list of things that this person's going to depend on this caregiver to provide a service for. Right. And like we were talking about a moment ago, there's compensation for that. So, and that's my question. What kind of money is following the person to make these renovations or care?
Clearly to qualify for the program, you have to have physical and, care needs that can be taken care of by someone, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to have a certain qualification for that. Then they do an evaluation of the home or where you're going. The case that Ned was talking about, so with his gentleman, they found a handicap accessible apartment. So all of those things were already addressed. Okay. The grab bars, the widening, easily accessible.
Like showers and things like that, yeah.
So
roll-in showers,
yeah.
So for the individual who I just placed in the program, there were some renovations that had to be done to the apartment, his home. And there was a budget. We had a budget of about $10,000 that the state gave us, and they sent their own contractor to do an evaluation. And what was the work? Did the home qualify? And the home did qualify. So they added the grab bars. They changed it from a bathtub. They took out the bathtub. They put in the roll-in, the walk-in shower. And it was all, so by the time he moved in, all of that was taken care of for him. So it's about $10,000 is that budget.
Okay.
And then the state itself for the care needs, it's a little different depending on which county you're in, because in Fairfield County, costs are greater. Different counties have different. So the state has their own number, but let's say it's about maybe $8,000 a month or some number that the state has decided is where they say uncle. If it's more than this, they stay. If it's this or less, then they get to go. And it's about 8 is my recollection as to what we had for a budget the last time. It's really nice. Not a lot of people know about it. Ned and I have had, we've had people who have been in the nursing homes a long time. My case was someone who had that tragic accident. Mm-hmm. He was in care for a long time, but it was because he was in rehab, unlike Ned's gentleman who was there for a significant period of time. And so it provides a new lease on life for a lot of people.
Folks, you are listening to Legal Notes with Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron from the Charter Oak Law Group. I'm Gary Byron. I want to stick with that program for just a few more minutes, particularly now when it pertains to the caregiving aspect of it.
Well, actually, as Mary Ann was just speaking, I was thinking about something that is a consideration that might be viewed as one of the, an added twist that we haven't talked about yet is that even though there's the state that has this Money Follows a Person program, that they're going to get the living space set up for their needs and all that. And even in the case of the gentleman who I talked about, the story I told, that there was a live-in caregiver, that isn't where it ends, right? There is still a need for somebody to oversee that. In the case for me as a conservator, so in Connecticut, a conservator is someone, in some states it's called a guardian, but of adults. But in Connecticut, a conservator is appointed by a probate court to basically to manage the needs, financial or living and health care needs of an individual who is found incapable of making those decisions for themselves. And that's the case that I'm talking about now, where so it could be me as a conservator, or it could be someone as a family member. There still needs to be someone on the outside who is overseeing this. It doesn't mean that you have a role to play every day, because you're expecting that caregiver is going to be providing all the needs. However, things come up.
Sure.
Caregivers, the caregiver gets in a car accident and, on the way back from a party, or in the case of COVID.
Yeah.
COVID hit. I was responsible for making sure that the groceries got there. So I was using Peapod.
Oh, yeah.
COVID hit, and Peapod was no longer available. They weren't delivering, or you couldn't get an appointment. So what
Who
was
had to buy the
someone to do?
groceries?
Yeah.
Right. So I had to go out every week and go to the grocery store and buy groceries and take them to. Oh, right. Yes.
Oh my God. No backup generator. We needed a generator for what was the machine that he needed. But you ended up having to call the police.
Oh my
to make
goodness.
Sure. Remember?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was kind of a long story, but if you're without power for days, and you have an elderly person who's in this. It was in the winter, so where's the heat? Where's the hot water? Where's all that? It eventually was resolved, but it's one of those things where, again,
you still need
somebody still has to be.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about how great this program is, it's one thing that I want people to understand, that if you're thinking, oh, my parent, maybe I can get my parent out of the nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, but keep in mind that it's likely that you or someone else is going to have to take some kind of
Well, the bills still have to get paid. You still got to pay your light bill, your cable bill, your heat bill.
Well, true, yes, and I that was part of my job as a conservator too.
Right.
But I'm saying also that you're going to have to make sure that those care needs are being met, because if the caregiver or the agency falls down, you got to come up with a backup.
Yep.
Do we have time to go into the assisted living pilot program? What are we looking at with time, Ryan? Is it?
I can just briefly address it, so that if you have someone who happens to have moved to, so oftentimes people, our parents say, okay, I'm going to sell the house, but I want to move into an assisted living facility, right? And so that is a nice way to maintain your independence and not have the prime responsibilities and obligations. And so if you have someone who has been in assisted living, it used to be that this Money Follows the Person program did not exist for people who lived in assisted living. So there is a pilot program that the state started to help people whose circumstances, who did live.
Oh.
And I just wanted to make sure that people understood that this is just an example of another program that is available to people out there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that it is really for people who don't. So a nursing home is a longer term for it is a skilled nursing facility,
right?
And most people who are there are supposed to be requiring skilled nursing care, but oftentimes you have people that are in nursing homes, especially that are on Medicaid or Title 19, who don't have skilled nursing needs. Yeah. But they still need to be someplace where they're supported every day for food, for bathing, for food, for all that. So assisted living is a step down from the nursing here. There's not the skilled nursing care being given there, but all the other supports for food, clothing.
Again, we've talked about this today. We've talked about this in other shows. It really comes down to the level of care that you need, and it's a fluid situation. It's constantly going to be changing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what life is all about, right?
Yeah, the things that we learn here, all these different programs that a lot of people probably weren't even familiar with and didn't even know existed.
Right. Yep.
You know?
So that would take up, you were talking about that initial consult, how much time?
Yeah.
There you go. Done. If you listen to the show,
Well, but now that's a general overview. Then how it applies specifically to each individual person.
Right.
I remember you saying, was it last week, that nothing is cookie cutter?
No.
Where when you customize a plan or around someone's specific needs, that's when you start getting into the weeds. All the more reason why I think people really need to sit down and make an appointment with you guys and talk about things in detail.
So, yeah.
And we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I know. I can tell you are, and I can sense the passion in you. And again, what I learned from today, one of the things that I've learned, is that there are people that live with people for 24/7, and God bless them. I mean, that's an incredible responsibility.
Yeah,
it is.
Folks, if you would like to do that, learn more about this. First of all, I would suggest that you stop over at charteroaklaw.com. You probably get the most amount of information, and maybe even get some of your questions answered. Of course, it may spark others, but that's okay too, because there's a phone number I'm going to give to you momentarily as well. It's charteroaklaw.com. I would start there. The phone number for you to get some questions answered, hey, maybe even make an appointment, 860-570-1229. I'll repeat that for you. Write it down, too. Give you an extra second here. 860-570-1229. You can ask your question to them, or you can also email a question to legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. Once again, legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. And maybe, hey, if you've got a question that you would like to have asked over the airwaves, you could be helping someone else as well. Could be even as soon as next week. They do have offices in Bloomfield, Danbury, and Norfolk. So make sure that you get all the details and driving instructions and directions from charteroaklaw.com. For Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron, I'm Gary Byron. Thank you so much for listening to Legal Notes. Until next Saturday morning, have a good one, everybody. So long.